I'm walking you through my top 12 rookies for the 2023 fantasy football season. We'll of course hit this from a dynasty angle, but I will be talking redraft along the way, so this is an all-encompassing fantasy football rookie mock draft video. The Fantasy Football Show, it begins right now.
This is the Fantasy Football Show with your host, Smitty.
Take a lap.
Okay, so every time I mention someone, I'm going to do my very best to hit it from a dynasty angle, but also speak to the redraft, because we're drafting these rookies in redraft, we're drafting these rookies in dynasty, we're drafting them in best ball. I might try and mix best ball into the mix as well. Actually, I will mix best ball into the mix. But no matter what we're looking at, dynasty, redraft, your grandma league, your shark league, where you think you've got the toughest league in the world, and you say, Smitty,
my league's smart. It's hard to do things in my league. I can't.
Everyone thinks their league's the best, Bob, but let me tell you what is absolute. Bijan Robinson is the #1 overall player in fantasy football, rookie rankings, rookie evaluation, maybe even dynasty overall. Yeah, you heard me. I might draft Bijan #1 overall in a dynasty startup that includes everybody, the vets and the rookies together. This is the next LaDainian Tomlinson meets Saquon Barkley meets Nick Chubb. He's a pure runner. He's strong. He can catch. He can change directions and hit that next gear after he hits the hole and makes 2 or 3 defenders miss. His combine will raise his draft stock, which currently is in a weird spot. I say that because he's kind of sitting in a limbo territory where you have a lot of people, a lot of scouts projecting him top 10. And then you have the old minds, the old dogs that say, oh, running backs don't go early. We know that, Bob.
But Smitty, no one takes a running back early.
That is true, except for Bijan, or maybe except for Bijan. Now, if Bijan doesn't go out and blow away everybody at the combine, his workouts, his pro day, whatever, then it's possible he slips out of the concept of being a top 10 running back in today's climate where running backs don't go, but maybe somewhere near the bottom of round 1 and most of them in round 2. The running back is devalued, but Bijan is different. Bijan is special, and if he increases his overall value across the league with scouts and teams and everybody else in the media to drive home some of that hype, which will affect everybody, teams, scouts, teams will be affected by hype. The more a guy's talked about, the more everybody starts, inquiring, and then they know that they can't, the cat's out of the bag. So with Bijan, it'll be very important what happens with his combine performance and his pro day, his workouts. Does he go as high as 7, 8, 9, 10? And this is Bijan Row. This is where I believe Bijan's got the most likelihood to go early, if he goes early, to these spots. Raiders might be without Josh Jacobs. They may franchise tag Josh Jacobs at a measly 10 mil. For a running back, that's a pretty good price. So they could franchise tag him at 10 mil. The franchise window opened on the 21st of February. It closes on March 7. So we'll know what's going on with the Raiders running back situation. The Falcons could be very tempted to take Bijan there, even though they have Tyler Algier. But I think this pick gets moved in a Lamar Jackson deal, which I'll talk about later in a separate video, because I have a lot of ideas around this Falcons offense and fantasy football team construction. Carolina would definitely take a peek under the hood. And the Philadelphia Eagles, can you imagine if they had the balls to draft Bijan Robinson at 10? How scary the offense, the entire team would be walking into 2023. Bijan's a difference maker. This is like when Adrian Peterson was passed on by a handful of teams his rookie year because of team need. Generational talent, beyond generational talent, like Bijan at the running back position, trumps any team need. I'm not saying a team that has JT would want to take him. I'm not saying the Jets with Breece Hall need to take him. But when you have a player like DeAndre Swift, when you have a player like even Algier, who we love, even a player like Dameon Pierce, who we love, we called his rise last year. Those guys are amazing players. I love them if no competition's brought into the equation. But if you are one of these clubs, you take Bijan. You don't hesitate, you take him. That's my scouting analysis. But obviously, I'm not in charge of these situations, so we are at the mercy of the decision making of some of these clubs. So is there a shot that Bijan falls into this range right here? Yeah, Detroit at 18 might take him. The Chargers at 21 would be crazy not to, with the Thunder and Lightning approach that they had success with in the past, and they need to do something different in in LA anyway. Houston, as I mentioned, Baltimore at 22. If they're rebuilding and they get rid of Lamar, or even if they don't, they may want to use that 22 pick on Bijan to help support Lamar and get back to the ground and pound that they've been trying to implement for a couple years now, unsuccessfully, because they lean on their quarterback for about 180 to 200 totes a season, which gets Lamar hurt. Lamar's been hurt 2 years out of the last 3. Lamar's a bust in Baltimore until they do something different. Bijan might be something different. That might turn my mind around in terms of projecting success or failure for Lamar in Baltimore. But I do, like I mentioned earlier, I think this draft pick right here is headed to Baltimore with a couple others, at least 3 first-rounders in exchange for Lamar Jackson, who's going to Atlanta, in my opinion, and my hope at least, so that Kyle Pitts and Drake London can catch footballs from Lamar, and Lamar can go from a bust candidate for me to a potential monster. Situation matters a lot. But imagine Philly with this man Bijan Robinson. We don't know if Bijan's going to slip down into the teens or even the early 20s. It's possible. No matter what way you spin it, this guy's the 1.1. No matter what way you spin it, I see based on the eye test that he is the next LT or Barkley. And it doesn't really matter if the stats didn't support it, but the stats do support it. Do you know what I'm saying? Because sometimes an eye test can be more powerful than stats. Sometimes stats can be overwhelmingly powerful over the eye test. Maybe a player got injured. Or in the case of Jackson Smith-Njigba, who we'll talk about in a minute, he didn't play 2022. He played 4 games. He didn't do anything in 2022. Strike that, he played 3. It was very disappointing with a hamstring injury. And so you have to look at his 2021 season in college, which was amazing. Big Ten history record wide receiver performance. My point being that sometimes you have to go heavy on stats, sometimes you have to go heavy on eye tests, sometimes you have to go heavy on a combination. And a lot of people sometimes say to me, and I don't know why I get coined this, I think because I do a lot of bold predicting, but people oftentimes will say,
Smitty, I know you're not a stat guy. You're more of a just a gut instinct guy. But I like this.
I am a stat guy. I'm a gut instinct guy. But I'm also a stat guy. I do a combination. Sometimes a lot of the stats are moving behind the scenes in my head because I know them, and then I start talking about the intangibles and the things that I feel, the gut instinct that I have, because the gut instinct that I have ultimately is driven off of stats sometimes, or sometimes, like in the case of Arian Foster, when I predicted his rise on NBC Sports Radio back in 2010.
Arian Foster. He's a guy we've been recommending people reach for in the 4th and 5th round in most drafts. I see nothing but big things for this guy, and he's my monster breakout prediction for 2010.
I said 2 games I watched. There wasn't a lot to go on from college, some, but I watched 2 games in week 16 and week 17 back then in 2010. That's all I watched, the 2 games. No, I mean, you didn't have anything else to look at. He was an undrafted free agent, right? He emerged in week 16 and week 17. And after watching those 2 games, I went on NBC Sports Radio and I said, this guy is going to be a top 5 overall running back, top 5 overall player in fantasy football 2010. And he was a 6th, 7th, and 8th round pick, depending on when you drafted early on versus as you crept into near August, he was about a 5th round pick. And all I had was 2 games. Sometimes in the predictive business, you do have to go off pure gut instinct and you have nothing else to go on. Sometimes you get a combination of everything. In the case of Bijan, we have a mix of everything to support what I'm saying. 6.3 yards per carry with a 4.3 coming after contact. Amazing numbers. That's in 2022. Even dating back to high school, this guy rushed for 2,000 yards 3 straight times with a whopping 13.7 yards per carry average. Was rated a 4-star recruit by ESPN coming into college and a 5-star by 24/7 Sports. His freshman year, he played about 9 games, ran for about 700 yards, just getting going. Sophomore season, 2021. Not this past college season, but the one prior. The guy ripped off 11.27 on 195 carries. That's 5.8 yards a pop. 11 TDs, 26 receptions, wasn't bad for about 300 yards in 2022. He ran the ball 258 times for 1580 on the ground, 6.1 yards a pop, 18 touchdowns, a long of 79, 19 receptions, 314 receiving, and 2 TDs receiving. He could have been used more, but as I pointed out and alluded to all last offseason when people had a problem with Kenneth Walker's college receiving production,
You have to use your eyeballs.
Bijan Robinson is an amazing receiving back. He has great hands. At the pro level, if he's drafted into an environment that's going to utilize him as a 3-down back, he's going to be a 3-down back. There's no concern at all about his receiving ability just because he pulled in 26 receptions and 19 receptions, which is not bad in college anyway. But if anybody thinks those numbers mean he can't be a 55, 65, even 70 reception back at the next level, he can be. The best way I can describe Bijan is smooth,
well-oiled machine.
power, precision, and a LaDainian Tomlinson type feel when he's knifing through a hole and getting the yardage and creating missed tackles along the way. He is so powerful and smooth at the same time. You can only think of LT when you describe him, or a combination of LT and Barkley. My number 1 overall rookie pick in a 2023 mock draft, and obviously real draft if you have one coming up. And my number 1, tied with Breece Hall, dynasty running back in fantasy football 2023 dynasty rankings go forward. Now I might draft Jamar Chase or Justin Jefferson at 1 in a dynasty startup if I want to go wide receiver heavy, depending on the league size. If it's a 3 wide receiver league, if I feel like people are going to gobble up wide receivers, that's the direction I could go. But I would take Bijan at number 1 overall in a dynasty startup that included all the rookies, that included all the veterans. I'm not scared to take Bijan number 1 in dynasty, and it's not a reach. I don't care if it's a couple picks earlier than some people might take him. Doesn't matter. You reach for your guy at a certain point. Now in redraft, is he a top 5 running back as a rookie? I say yeah. Do you have to take him inside the top 5 overall in a redraft startup as of this moment right now on February 24th? No, you do not. In fact, if you take Bijan inside the top 5 because you get excited about my video, you're not paying attention. He's going around 8 to 14 overall in current redraft, mock drafts, and best ball drafts. So if you've got to reach about 7 or 8, that's not crazy. You're not wasting opportunity making sure he's your first drafted player, but at the tail end or middle to tail end of the first round. But don't get overly excited and start getting in your own way and start ruining his ADP and contributing to that drive of his value up into the top 5 or 6 overall in redraft. Don't contribute to that. But know that I am totally 100% okay with you taking Bijan Robinson as your first drafted player in round 1, in redraft, in best ball, his rookie year, but as close to the 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 as possible. 100% Smitty approved.
You've just been Smitty approved.
I know.
Smitty, what if his ADP does climb to 5 or 6? Would you recommend I take him?
Absolutely, but only if it climbs to that value. Don't try and pretend that it's there when it's not. You are doing yourself a disservice drafting him in a redraft too high. Dynasty number 1 overall pick. Number 2 is a clear and easy choice for me, and that is Jahmyr Gibbs. Jahmyr Gibbs is the closest thing that we've seen to Alvin Kamara since Alvin Kamara came out of college. And I know a little something about Alvin Kamara, and I have a little bit of authority and ability to speak on this and tell you who the next Alvin Kamara is, because I called Alvin Kamara and I called him a top 5 running back on my bold predictions on the fantasyfootballshow.com. Year-round rankings, bold predictions, text device, the trade calculator. I've been dropping bold predictions professionally on CBS and NBC Sports Radio for the 19 years that I was on radio, on the longest radio show, fantasy football radio show in the world. And on said radio show, your boy dropped Alvin Kamara as a rookie before he had taken a snap, really after the NFL draft, when he landed in a what was then cloudy situation in New Orleans, where people said, I don't know if he can get out of this cloudy situation, for one. Number 2, he's too small. And while we don't like Kamara now, Kamara's on the decline, he's going to get suspended, that's a whole mess. But predicting Alvin Kamara was a pretty tall order, given his size, given his cloudy situation, given that in fantasy football rookie drafts like this, he was typically around 6, 7. In his rookie class to most people, and I had him as a top 5 overall dynasty fantasy football running back on record. This guy is the next Alvin Kamara. He is Jahmyr Gibbs, and he does everything Kamara does, and in some ways he may do some of it better. After playing 2 seasons at the college level, he transferred to Alabama, played 11 games. He ran for 850 on 136 attempts at 6.3 a pop, 7 touchdowns, no fumbles, and he caught 42 passes for 378 yards. 42 passes in college on 11 games is extra impressive. And as I alluded to earlier, when you're looking at these stats here, no 1,000-yard seasons. In 2022, he had the 926 and the 7 rushing touchdowns, the 44 receptions for 444 yards and the 3 TDs. Obviously, a tremendous amount of total yards in each of the last 2 seasons. The Georgia Tech season before he transferred, 746 and 465 in terms of the yardage. But some might be like, he hasn't had a 1,000-yard season, Smitty. Again, like I alluded to earlier, you need to have some gut instinct involved with some of the statistics, and you need to be able to connect the dots and kind of close the gaps. And this guy, Jahmyr Gibbs, in the right spot, and I think he will be in the right spot, is a top maybe 5 to 10 running back. Let's keep the range top 10, but I think it's as high as 5. And when you look at potential landing spots, he fits the bill for the traditional running back value, which would be tail end of round 1, right? Because Bijan's the only running back that's going to temporarily, not long term, the running back values will regress back to late first round after Bijan, if Bijan even breaks that mold temporarily. But where Gibbs is going to fall, it's Dallas, it's Buffalo, it's Cincy, it's Philadelphia, it's maybe even KC, but Philly would be a dangerous spot. Philly, if they get Bijan or they get Jahmyr Gibbs at 30. Philly's back in the Super Bowl if they draft Bijan at 10 or they draft Jahmyr Gibbs at 30. They're too explosive. They help keep defenses so honest that either that running back's going to destroy defenses because defenses are too consumed by trying to shut down Jalen Hurts, or it's going to open up Jalen even more. But I love Buffalo, Cincy, Philly. Those are all amazing spots for Jahmyr Gibbs. And if he falls into the very top of round 2, kind of like Javonte did, because running backs outside of Bijan could fall into the tail end of round 1 or the top of round 2, he could have a great landing spot as well. Next, Alvin Kamara. Easily my number 2 overall rookie running back. And in Dynasty, I would take him as high, easily take him as high as round 2. If you need to use ADP to your advantage. We fully don't even know where his Dynasty ADP is settling. In redraft, he's a 5 to 6 round pick. Don't reach any higher. Don't say, well, Smitty loves this guy, I'm taking him around 4 because I want him. Don't do it. He's got a 5.5 to 6.7 ADP in redraft in best ball on Underdog Fantasy. Promo code Smitty. They match up to $100 in your first deposit. Link is in the description. But when we're drafting on Underdog, he's falling to 5.5, 5.7, 5.9, 6.5. Don't take him as your 4th drafted player. You could win your best ball league on the drafting of Gibbs outside of your top 4 drafted players. Make him your top 5 or 6 drafted player, and you got a great shot at winning your league if this guy becomes what I think he could become. Easily my 1.02, Jahmyr Gibbs. Let's go.
You've just been Smitty approved.
Now, while a lot of people think the wide receiver class is phenomenal, I'm going to say something that might make some people roll their eyes. This wide receiver class is not the 2022 wide receiver class. Proof by the Moonman list for 2023. Look at this bad boy. It's loaded with wide receivers from last year's draft class. The sophomore wide receivers are legit, and they consume a big amount of the 2023 Moonmen here on the channel.
The Moonmen, dropping loads in outer space.
Just adding Drake London to the mix recently. Pickens, you got Watson.
Space Monsters.
You got Garrett Wilson and Olave. Garrett Wilson and Olave and Watson, in my opinion, and London. I mean, I have to include them all. They all have top 10 wide receiver upside. And while you might say, Smitty,
How are they all in the top 10?
changing of the guard. The youth of fantasy football is swapping out with the old dogs, and it's across all positions. QB, tight end, wide receiver, running back. Take a look at the top 15 overall players. They're all young players. Not only are they the now redraft players, but they're also the future, the dynasty guys. These are 2 top 10 running backs. London, Garrett Wilson, Olave, maybe even Christian Watson. Those are all top 10 wide receivers, and some of the old dogs are going to fall out. The Mike Evans, the Godwins. I'm all about building off of the now in even dynasty, because I think too many people think 4 or 5 years down the road. But the crazy part about this moment in time in fantasy football is the now is the future. It's almost all encompassing. My number 3 overall is Zach Charbonnet, who I think could be one of the top 10 overall players, especially top 10 running backs in redraft 2023. Imagine how much I love Zach Charbonnet in Dynasty if I'm telling you that all 3 of these guys could be top 10 running backs in 2023 redraft. Now, just to get this out of the way, take Charbonnet in redraft at about round 8, mid 7 to 8, preferably 8 to 9. Don't go taking Charbonnet at what could constitute a top 10 overall running back draft selection. You're not paying attention if you are using this video to elevate guys way too high. You have to draft around ADP and take advantage of it. And Charbonnet in redraft as a 7.5 to 9.5 ADP in redraft. You can win a league off this guy in round 8. You can win a league off Gibbs in round number 5.5 to 6.5. You could ruin your upside taking Gibbs in the 3rd round or top of 4 because you get excited about my video. Okay, redraft out of the way. Dynasty, borderline 2nd, 3rd round turn. I guess we don't know yet. We don't have ADP data for dynasty startups yet that make a lot of sense because the landing spots for these guys will change everything. And so we're kind of guessing at this point. We also don't have a lot of data. The Super Bowl just happened. We're in February still. So when you have little data, you have thousands of drafts instead of 40,000 drafts to look at. Your data is going to be a little off. Not to mention, you go on any mock draft tool right now, if you're not going on Best Ball, Underdog Fantasy, where people are actually paying good money to draft, so the ADP, at least for redraft, because there's no dynasty, but the redraft ADP is absolute fire and on the money because people are putting skin in the game. So $100 bonus match, up to $100 bonus match, dollar for dollar. If you deposit 50, they'll give you 50. If you deposit 100, they'll give you 100. Promo code Smitty, link in description. Do best ball drafts right now with the rookies included. These are live drafts. These are best ball 2023 drafts. So all those drafts generate a great ADP. And that's how I know that Charbonnet has a 7th round ADP. That's how I know Gibbs has a for sure 5.5 to 6 round ADP. What we don't know is in Dynasty, because we have very little data and it's a guessing game. But Charbonnet, I imagine in a dynasty startup, somewhere around the top of 3 would be a steal, your 3rd drafted player. Gibbs could be your 2nd drafted player. Bijan could be your 1st drafted player. I'm not saying draft all 3 of these guys, although I'm not against that at all. I'm merely telling you where their ADPs fall. In Charbonnet, let me just tell you this. Zach Charbonnet is the most difficult running back to tackle in college football. In 2022 at UCLA, Zach Charbonnet ran for 1359, 14 touchdowns, caught 37 receptions for 321. Year prior, when I thought he was coming out and I ranked him as my number 3 rookie running back last year behind Walker and Breece Hall, he had 1137 and 13 TDs, was my surprise monster running back 3. He returned to college. I was brokenhearted. I said, oh, guys, wait, just wait. He'll come back. Entering into the 2023 NFL draft, and look at him now. He's still running back 3, but he's got the upside. I'm just telling you this right now. He has the upside to be the number 1 running back in this entire draft class if he fell into, let's say, the Eagle landing spot or the Buffalo Bills or somewhere we mapped out as an ideal landing spot for these 2 guys. Zach Charbonnet is a workhorse. Zach Charbonnet on 195 attempts averaged 7.0 yards per carry. If you have never seen this guy run the football, I plead with you to pull up YouTube footage right after this video and watch the guy run. He cannot be tackled. Not by 1 guy, not by 2 guys. Even when the 1st and 2nd guy get together and try and tackle this guy, it's merely to slow him down so the 3rd and 4th guy can pile on top of him and they can finally not even drag him into the ground, maybe push him out of bounds. He is so hard to tackle. I promise you, if you've not seen footage of this guy, you're going to come back to me in the comments and say, Smitty, I can't believe how good this guy looks. He might actually be the running back 1 in this rookie class. I can't tell you how many times people do that. And if you don't think Zach Charbonnet is the real deal, put it in the comments. I want to hear it. I want to read why you think Zach Charbonnet is not going to be a top 10 running back at the next level, because everything I see when I watch him visually, the stats are all there. We have all the data we need, but when I watch him visually, the eye test, it tells me that it's Nick Chubb meets Saquon Barkley. He runs harder than any running back I've seen, and I love Bijan. I talked up how hard and strong and aggressive Bijan runs. Smooth. This guy runs harder than anybody I've seen. He is Derrick Henry meets Nick Chubb meets Saquon Barkley. He stands 6'1", 220 pounds. He's a monster. He's the prototypical build for a workhorse back. 220, 6'1", excellent size, excellent power, excellent vision, amazing hands. He has everything you want in a running back. All he needs is someone to believe in him, and I think they will. I think his combine is going to look amazing. His pro days, his workouts are going to vault his value into the 2-3 range for running backs taken off the board in the 2023 NFL draft. And if he lands in the right place, the sky's the limit. He's a top 10 running back, Smitty approved at my number 3 spot, and a steal at number 3.
You've just been Smitty approved.
Okay, now here's where it gets crazy. And we've got Tucker, we've got Kendre Miller, we've got Bigsby at running back still on the top 10 board. We got Jackson Smith-Njigba, we got Jordan Addison, we got Quentin Johnston. We got Zay Flowers, one of my favorites in this draft. Who's the 1.4? I think the safest move is to rank Jackson Smith-Njigba here because he'll probably have the best opportunity and the most belief that he's a legit, wide receiver one for his team. I'm not saying Johnston won't be drafted like in Baltimore to be the number one. And let's say they keep Lamar. This would be a great fit for Lamar to get Johnston. He's like a glorified tight end in a sense that plays wide receiver, a DK Metcalf, if you will. A lot of DK Metcalf comparisons. He looks as big as DK. He doesn't weigh as much, but he definitely has the wingspan. He's a monster. So he could be a wide receiver one for a team for sure. But he's a little more raw. This guy is going to be looked at as a wide receiver one. Not saying he will for sure get drafted to a team that only has, one mediocre wide receiver and he's the clear-cut one. He could go somewhere like Jameson went to Detroit, so he had St. Brown and Jameson Williams. He could go somewhere and share the wide receiver one role. I'm not saying that can't happen, but he's probably got the most belief across the league circles to land in the best spot or opportunity, I'd imagine. And he looks amazing. His route running is unmatched. He's precise. He doesn't have top end speed, but guess what? He reminds me a lot of Cooper Kupp. And I don't know that he'll ever reach Cooper Kupp's level, but he could. In the right spot, he could. And his 2021 season was the best season in Big Ten history. And might I remind everybody that when he had his breakout, record-breaking best wide receiver season in Big Ten history in 2021, guess what two wide receivers were on his team in the lineup when he had that big year? Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson. You heard me right. Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave, two guys on my Moon Men list.
The Moon Men, dropping loads in outer space.
This guy and this guy, both top 10 wide receivers in my book for 2023.
Space Monsters.
And beyond. Both of those monsters were on Jackson Smith-Njigba's squad in the lineup as starters when he dropped that 2021 campaign. So that's ultra impressive. I'm not saying that makes him better than Olave and Garrett Wilson because he's not in my book. Those are two top 10 wide receivers. This guy's going to be borderline 8 to 12 for the future, maybe 12 to 15 as a rookie, depending on where he goes. But I'm just making a point that this guy did amazing things. And Garrett Wilson's called him one of the best athletes he's ever seen. So that's a great compliment from Garrett Wilson. Now, Addison is probably right here. Johnston is probably right here. Addison, he reminds me of a guy that could become A.J. Brown, or he could become Justin Blackmon, or A.J. Brown, or become Kevin White, or Corey Davis. He's on the verge of both. He's smaller, but look at Devontae Smith. Everybody said Devontae Smith won't develop. He's too small. He'll get manhandled at the line of scrimmage. And this guy doesn't even look small when you watch him on film. Devontae looks skinny. This guy doesn't even look skinny. He looks really, really built, but he is very small. Addison's 175 pounds. He's 6'0". So he's tall, but he's very slender. Very Devontae Smith-like. So given that Devontae had success, I'm not too worried about that, but he still has some vibes of being the next A.J. Brown or being the next Corey Davis. So it's kind of concerning to put him here, but he's so talented and he had such a big 2021. It's hard not to. And while I love Johnston, who stands at 6'4", 215 pounds, will probably run a sub 4.4 40. While I want to put him at the number one or number two wide receiver spot, he's a little raw and he's coming off a barely 1,000-yard season, so 1069, 6 TDs, 60 receptions, but he's still developing in his route running. He runs pretty good routes considering his size, and he's quick off the line. I like all three of these wide receivers. The one guy, and we haven't gotten back to an RB yet, and we're certainly not going to go QB or tight end yet, but Tucker and Kendre Miller are definitely in the mix here. I want everybody to know that. But Zay Flowers is a guy that I just have a tough time not putting right here. So we kind of went 3 RBs, 3 wide receivers. But Zay Flowers could be the number one wide receiver in this draft class. I think after his combine, after he starts, impressing people across the board in all categories and starts making a name for himself as just being so elusive and electric. Steve Smith. Antonio Brown meets Steve Smith is kind of what Zay Flowers looks like and reminds me of. And there's a real good shot that he's so impressive at the combine across all categories that he vaults up to the number one ranked wide receiver in the 2023 NFL draft class. So be prepared for a huge rise in value. Right now, you can get him here. Right now, I tell you I rank him here, but with the thought process that if I'm on the clock, I might actually draft him as the first wide receiver off the board and say throw ADP to the wind because it's arguable at this point. So just know that quietly, this is my number one, but be careful how you rank him and get away with what you can now. Sean Tucker, because we don't know if he'll for sure get a starting gig, this guy ranks around 1.8, which is an absolute steal. And if you've got a 1.6 to 1.8, you're pretty much assured you're going to get Sean Tucker unless he lands in the best running back spot and everybody starts hyping him up. Guy's a former track star. Some say he doesn't have the best top end speed. I don't really get that because he is a track star. But we'll see what his 40 time is. If he's a sub 4.4, that's all you need. He could run the fastest 40 time, or A-Chain could run the fastest 40 time. It could be between Tucker and A-Chain to run the top 2 to 3 40 time. Once his 40 time's confirmed and he proves he's track and field fast still, he's so quick when you watch him on the field. He's built like a tank. He's 205 pounds, 5'10". I'm looking at a projected 40 time of 4.54. See, that's what I'm saying. It's weird. Some of his 40 times are ranked very low, but the guy has a track background, so I'm pretty confident that he'll be like a 4.4 minimum, but he could be sub 4.4. But he had 1,000 yards on the ground in 2022, 11 touchdowns, 36 receptions for 254. The same thing with some of the wide receivers. The 2021 season was better than the 2022. He played 12 games in 2021, rushed for an amazing 15 on the ground, 1,500 yards on 247 carries, 6.1 a pop, 12 TDs, 1 fumble, and 18 receptions for 249. Guy is absolutely electric. And if Sean Tucker gets into an amazing situation, like some of the situations we mapped out, like Cincinnati or Buffalo or Philly, then Tucker to the moon. He's so electric. Kendre Miller is kind of my sleeper running back of this entire class in terms of like you're not going to force yourself to take him early, like Charbonnet, Gibbs, Bijan, even Tucker. I could see myself in the right environment where I need a RB, taking him at the 1.4. I love Tucker that much. Flowers, taking him at the 1.4. Kendre's falling. And Kendre Miller, if you watch him run, he looks like beast mode. He looks like Marshawn Lynch. And maybe he doesn't get drafted into the perfect, most ideal situation, which is why he kind of lingers right around here. But if he finds an amazing home or impresses so much at his pro day, which he very well could, or at the combine, he could climb into the number 4 running back spot or the top 6 overall in a rookie-only mock draft. So know that his value could climb, and I love Kendre Miller. He's a super big-time sleeper, as is Bigsby. So the 10, the 11, and then the 12. You could say Mayer, the first tight end off the board. Very talented guy. Probably a top 8 to 12 dynasty tight end right out of the gate. But the rookie tight ends do evolve very, very slowly. My sense with rookies at the tight end position is that I kind of swoop in after year 1, and when they have kind of a mediocre year 1, but you kind of know which rookie tight end's gonna break out and which one's looking to develop, that's when I come in a trade, or that's when I come in dynasty startup that year and see a sophomore tight end coming in. I rank number 1 in the entire fantasy industry in tight end draft rankings for 2021, 2020, and 2019 average. So all 3 years combined, I am number 1 according to Fantasy Pros in tight end rankings. And I'm telling you, my process is not to bank on rookies exploding at the tight end position. Is to identify coming out of year 1 which ones do have that promise. And sometimes it's like it could be Musgrave, the 3rd ranked tight end from this group. You don't really know. Mayer's probably the top guy from this class, but the value is going to be trading for him, going after him, coming into his sophomore year when he doesn't have quite the rookie year that you expect. Kyle Pitts had the best rookie year in the history of fantasy football tight ends, and look how his sophomore year went. So we just don't know what's going to happen with Mayer. The tight end position is tough to translate immediately. It's kind of like the way wide receivers used to be back in the day, like the Larry Fitzgerald days when he came in as a rookie. You get 700 yards, 4 touchdowns was the best a rookie wide receiver was ever going to do at the NFL level. And in fantasy, you were laughed at if you even drafted and redraft a rookie wide receiver ever. The tight end position is kind of similar in that it takes a couple years. So for me, given my experience with tight end predictions and breakouts, it's better to wait on this position and to swoop in and find the Hawkinson his sophomore year. And no one in the fantasy industry, according to Fantasy Pros, ranked TJ Hawkinson higher than I did his breakout year. And it's because of my process and how I attacked the tight end position that I was able to identify that he was the one. And everybody liked him coming into the draft, but then the rookie season soiled the the intrigue and the excitement, and then people start giving them away. Maybe they're going to fail. So, my 10, 11, 12, it's kind of just a mix between these guys. I do like Bryce Young as a potential, 10 overall, or you could put him at like 13 or 14. It really is a mixed bag. I think ultimately at the 10 spot, I put Bigsby there because he's an RB. I'd probably put Young or Stroud at that 11 and 12 and Mayer at the 13 spot if I was to rank these. But this is my 2023 top 12 overall rookies for the 2023 redraft dynasty best ball seasons. We're doing it live. We talked about it all. Now get on over to thefantasyfootballshow.com and get the rookie rankings and bold predictions and all the stuff that I got going on over there. I got one-on-one text device, trade calculators. I entered the fantasy football industry in 2003 because no one had a trade calculator, an instant-based trade calculator, and I wanted an instant-based trade calculator. And so your boy Smitty came into the business and developed one. And I've been in the business ever since, trying to solve problems, trying to be bold, trying to be ahead of the curve. And so ultimately, your boy Smitty's here to solve problems. I work for you. That's why I'm live Monday through Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern, every single Monday through Friday. That's why I'm live whenever news breaks. So if news breaks and you're like, oh, I wonder what's going on with this, Smitty's live. Let me go check out Smitty's evaluation of what just transpired on Newswires. And I'm live Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday at about midnight Eastern, pretty much every Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, doing live drafts, doing breaking news shows, doing mock drafts. I will see you all at the 7 p.m. show. Now go get Charbonnet, will ya?
Get Charbonnet. Pop open a nice bottle of Charbonnet.